Hey, what is up, everybody? Cam Jennings here, aka Cam Fats, coming at you on behalf of EpicConversions.com. I hope you guys are doing amazing out there. And today I want to talk about this book that I have just finished reading, Ben Settle's Biz World. You know, I'm actually kind of in between free content right now. That might sound kind of weird if you follow all these people on YouTube and stuff who just like are constantly on a content treadmill. They're constantly putting out free content. That's not really me. I do like to have free content that I put out regularly, but I do it in cycles. I'll do projects. You know, I just wrapped up Index Card Insights, which was 100 episodes long, and it was a project that spanned several months because I was doing 3 episodes a week. I just wrapped that up, so I'm kind of in between free content. I wasn't planning on putting out more like video or audio content until the new year. But I just finished reading this book, and I like to talk about these books when they're fresh in my mind. So I have 10 points to tell you on this book. But before I give you my 10 points on this book, let me just quickly give you a brief summary of what this is about. Essentially, this book, Biz World, it's about Ben Settle's take on world building as it relates to online business and business in general. And if you want to know what I mean by world building, I'm talking about, yes, that thing that you remember from a kid when you played D&D or role-playing games or whatever, like building these fantasy worlds like, science fiction and fantasy, not even just science fiction and fantasy. I keep relating it back to D&D and science fiction and fantasy, but it could be comic books, it could be any kind of fiction, it could be anything really. It's just this idea of building worlds, right? But he relates that idea of building worlds to business, right? So that's kind of what this book is about. It's a hard subject to teach, and I want to give you 10 points on this book now, okay? I enjoyed this book. It was an enjoyable read, and I think it was cool. Again, hard subject to teach, right? I don't know that everyone's going to get it, but let me get into my 10 points on this book. Point 1, there's some appendixes in the back of this book, some appendices, I guess you could say, in the back of this book. And one of the appendices, Appendix 6, it has a list of books that inspired Ben Settle when he was writing this book, and like books that further the conversation of the topic in this book. Which is awesome, right? And I always appreciate it when I see people do that in their books. Especially if I read a book and I really enjoy it, and I want to learn more about this topic, or I want to hear other viewpoints on this topic. I want to further that conversation on this topic, which I enjoyed this book. I enjoy this topic of world building as it relates to business. So yeah, I really did appreciate that appendix in the back of this book that kind of like lead you further down that that discussion of this particular topic. It was really cool, so I'm glad that was in there. The second thing that I'll tell you about, this also has to do with the appendixes. The appendices in this book, there's like, I think 6 of them, 6 or 7 of them maybe. The appendices in this book are mostly excerpts from his other books. He's got other books that he's put out, and there is some overlap in those books on the subject of world building. So he's taken particular snippets from other books that he's written, snippets that had a small part to do with world building, and he's put those in this book as appendixes. And it's cool because, again, it gives you a broader view of world building from the scope of a different book. And it also advertises his other book, which is good if you want to, again, further your scope, further your conversation on this topic. You want to go deeper down the rabbit hole and figure out more about not only this topic, but other stuff that Settle is talking about. So I think those appendixes do a good job for that, right? They're not just blatant advertisements, right? They actually give you more information on the subject of world building, but also advertise his books if you want to learn more about this subject as it relates to what that book happens to be about. Anyways, I thought it was really cool. I appreciate the appendixes. I did another review on a Ben Settle book called Email Schema. He does something similar in Email Schema. It was an appendix full of cool information, additional information about the subject talked about in the book. I really like the appendixes that Settle puts in the back of these books. Is it appendix? Appendices? I don't know. What's the plural form of appendix? Whatever. As long as my appendix is still working and I don't have to get it removed, that's all I care about. Anyways, I like the appendixes. That's the second point. The third point. This book is a collection. I wrote these down. If you want to see, I'm looking down at my my little paper. I wrote these down. What I like to do is I'll read the book and then I'll write down the things that stood out to me in the book while it's fresh on my mind. And I tell you what, I like to do it because it helps me retain information from the book. So anyways, the third thing, number three, this book is a collection of interviews and talks, right? It's not like Ben Settle sat down and wrote a book called World Building or Biz World. No, he curated a collection of interviews and talks that he did with other people on this subject, and he cleaned up those talks and made them in a readable form for this book. Now you might think, oh man, I don't like reading transcripts. I don't like reading interviews. I don't like reading experts. Okay, if you don't, then maybe this isn't for you. I don't know. It didn't bother me. Now, what is interesting is some of these talks, some of these interviews in this book, they were part of paid masterminds, right? They were not just available to the public. So you are getting privy to some information in here that the general public didn't get to hear. This wasn't just like YouTube interviews and stuff like that. This was information that people paid to be part of. So that is cool. It's kind of a look behind the curtain at some of these paid masterminds. And again, like I think personally, the interview format, it kind of added to the book in a way, because you were getting more than one voice in there. You were getting people asking questions and then him giving answers in there. And it did almost start to feel like you were a part of that. You were like an audience viewer or something in there. Just kind of listening to the interview or whatever. So I didn't mind it. I enjoyed it. And again, you could tell he cleaned it up a little bit. It wasn't just like, verbatim transcripts from interviews that were given. It was cleaned up. But that is the heart of what this book is. It's a collection of interviews and talks that Settle gives on the subject of world building as it relates to business. So that's number 3. Important to know that. Number 4, this is one of Ben Settle's cheapest books. Okay, you can get this on Amazon. I think this was like $20. Now I know you might think, what? That's not cheap. $20? That's not cheap for a book. I can go to Thrift Books and get it on sale I can get a book for $5, or I can go to a garage sale and get a book for 25 cents. Yeah, sure you can, but you're probably not going to find any of Settle's books at those garage sales or on thriftbooks.com, because he's one of those high ticket booksellers, right? Like I was doing a review on Dana Derrick's book not too long ago. And we're talking about guys who are high ticket booksellers. And when you come into these high ticket booksellers, their books are not cheap. This one's $20. It's probably one of his cheapest. Now, yeah, you can go out there and you can find a few Ben Settle books that are cheaper. I know his Villain series is pretty cheap also. But again, this one is pretty cheap at $20. You can get it on Amazon. You can't get all Ben Settle's books on Amazon. I have a few Ben Settle books that are a little bit higher priced. You can't buy them on Amazon. All right. So this one you can get on Amazon. It's like pretty cheap compared to other Ben Settle books. So what I would say about this, and the reason I bring it up, is because I think this is a good entry level book for Ben Settle. If you're interested in Ben Settle, but you don't want to spend a bunch of money, hey, this is a good entry level entry-level book, excuse me, to get you into Ben Settle and decide if you want to explore some of his more higher ticket books. I think the one, like, let's see, what do I got from him so far? I've got this one, which was $20 or $30. I've got breakneck content, which was over $100. And I've got email schema, which was, you got it for free when you picked up his email players newsletter, but that was $100. So that's what I've read. Excuse me. That's what I've gotten from Settle so far. But I've enjoyed all those books. I think they were all worth their price. Now, I don't know that these books are worth their price if you're not going to do anything with it. I think it's important to actually do something with it. And I think that's the whole point. When I read his stuff, I think that's a big point of what he's saying with his high prices. Like, I don't sell stuff to people who don't want to do anything. I don't want to sell to people who don't want to do anything. I'm selling books to people who actually want to implement and use the stuff I'm talking about, right? So I think that's kind of part of the point of making his stuff higher priced. He's trying to deter and detract people who aren't going to do anything with his stuff. By the way, none of these books offer refunds. Maybe this one has a refund because it's through Amazon. I don't know. But if you buy any of Settle's books, like, he doesn't do refunds, just so you know. But anyways, I think this is a good entry point. That's my fourth point. That I think this was a good entry point because of its price point. Number 5. I mentioned that this book contains the subject of world building as it relates to business. I also said I think this is kind of a hard subject to teach. So this book, it's trying to create a paradigm shift for people. It's trying to present an alternate way of thinking about your business. And again, I think that's hard sometimes. People look at their businesses in a certain kind of way. This book is trying to teach you an alternate way to look at your business, right? And I do think that can be hard to teach sometimes, especially to people who might not necessarily, care about fantasy or D&D or, building worlds or whatever. They're not thinking about it like that. They're not thinking about it on that kind of level. So again, it's about a paradigm shift. This is about, and he says this several times in the book, but it's about, he likes to give people different options for thinking is what he says. But in my opinion, what's happening here is Settle is trying to present you with something that would produce a paradigm shift in the way you think about your business, right? And I think that's good. I don't think it's a necessity for you to think about your business exactly like Settle thinks about his business. What I think is good is for you to start seeing your business in a different kind of way, right? An alternate way of looking at your business. There's something about seeing something that you're familiar with in a different light. There's something about looking at something you're very familiar with and seeing it for the first time all over again in a different way. That's the kind of thing that this book can do for you. It can help you see something you're familiar with and something you're very familiar with and that's very well known to you and help you kind of look at it in a different way, right? And I think that's what is really, really valuable about this book is that it helps you do that. It gives you this option, this alternate look, this different way of seeing something you're already familiar with. And I think that's where the value lies in this book. What else? What else can I tell you? Number 6. This book's 166 pages long. Okay? 166 pages long. And I don't know if you can see, but the print is not too bad. It's not too small. For us older dudes out there, The print's not too bad. The print's not too bad. I read his email schema book and the print was very small and I didn't like it. I loved the book, but I didn't like the print, the font size. It was a little too small for me. But I got through it. I wanted to read it, so I got through it. This one, on the other hand, not too hard to read. It's a good font size. And it's 166 pages long. I'm kind of a slow reader. So getting through a book like this, I'm a slow reader and a busy guy. So getting through a book like this took me a couple weeks to get through this book. It's 166 pages. Some people could get through this damn book in like a day or two. Like my son could probably get through this book in a day or two. Seriously, he's a whiz kid. He's a fast reader. Now me, it took me a couple weeks to get through a 166 page book. I read a little bit. I try to read a little bit every day. But I want you to know that's about how long of a book we're talking about. 166 pages, so it's not too long. It's good. It's a pleasant length. That's about the length of book I like. It's a pleasant length of book. 166 pages. 7. What's the 7th thing I can tell you about this book? There are a lot of repeated stories in this book, and I think one thing about Settle is he's the king of telling you the negative stuff about his books. He's the king of telling you, hey, listen, this book has a lot of this, and this in it. So if you don't like that stuff, this ain't for you. He's the king of that, man. He's the king of that. He's not trying to sell you on his stuff. He's going to tell you what it is. And I think it's almost like he tries to deter you from buying it, sometimes. But yeah, so this book has a lot of repeated stories. And again, that's something he talks about, in the description of the book before you even buy it. It's got a lot of repeated stories in it. What I'll tell you about the repeated stories is this. They are coming, like he'll tell a story to somebody in one interview, and then he'll tell the same story to someone else in a different interview, but it'll be in a slightly different way because the story will be told to fit the context of the question, right? The questions will be slightly different in those interviews. So the story will be told in a slightly different way, or different details will be added to the story. So, sometimes you'll hear someone tell a story once and you'll hear something, but then they'll tell the story a different time and they'll remember certain details that you didn't hear the first time you heard that story, right? I thought that was pretty cool. I think the repetitious storytelling is actually pretty helpful because the subject is hard to grasp, okay? This idea of world building as it relates to business, it's not an easy subject to grasp and to master. So the idea of repeated storytelling in here and kind of repeating the same stories from slightly different angles, I think it's actually pretty helpful to grasp the subject. But now, for me, I'm a fan of watching movies that I like more than once. I don't just watch, like some people I know, they'll watch a movie once, they don't want to watch it anymore. It's boring to them after that. My wife's kind of like that. She doesn't like watching movies she's already seen before. I personally like watching movies over and over again if I like them. I like the movie Vanilla Sky. I love that movie and I watch it. I've watched it plenty of times. I love the Shrek movies. I'm a big fan of the Shrek movies. And, I watch them. Conan the Barbarian. I'm a big fan of Conan the Barbarian. And I could go on and on with movies that I love and I enjoy. Inception was another movie I really enjoyed. But The Truman Show. Don't get me started on movies, okay? I love movies, but the point is, movies that I love, I'll watch them over and over. It doesn't bother me to watch movies I love more than once. And the thing about it is, watching these movies more than once, I will notice different things that I didn't notice the first time that I watched the movie. Recently, we watched Planes, Trains, and Automobiles at my house. And the thing is, it's kind of become a yearly tradition to watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. We watch it around Thanksgiving every year. So every year we watch this movie. Well, I noticed things every time I watched this movie that I didn't notice before, right? I noticed new things. And I think, another movie like that for me is It's a Wonderful Life. Usually around Christmas every year I try to watch It's a Wonderful Life. And I generally notice something new, or I see something in a different way every time I watch the movie. It's the same movie, it hasn't changed, but I'm watching it again, I'm seeing it again, and I'm noticing different things. Well, this book has repeated stories in it, right? And I kind of view it the same way. I'm hearing a story for the third time in the book, right? And like, look, I mean, some people aren't into that. They don't want to hear the same story again and again. But me, I'll hear the story for the same time, for the same, like 3 times in the book, same story about, Narnia or whatever. And it's like the third time we've talked about this or made this point, but like it'll be made in a slightly different way, in a slightly different context. And like, I'll get something new from it. Right. So that's me. I don't know that everyone's going to enjoy that. But this book's full of that, right? You will get the same stories being told from a different perspective, a different lens, from a slightly different angle with slightly different details throughout this book. I thought it was really cool. You don't see that done in books a whole lot. At least I don't. And I thought it was interesting because the subject matter is kind of complicated. The idea of turning your business into a world. It's like, it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a complicated subject. So anyways, that's another thing about the book I thought was interesting. So what's the eighth thing? What's the eighth thing I can tell you about this book? So again, the eighth thing I can tell you about this book is something I've already mentioned. These concepts, are somewhat hard to teach, right? They're somewhat hard to teach. The concepts of world building and turning your business into a world or like some kind of an ecosystem, right? These concepts are hard to teach. They're hard to kind of wrap your mind around. There's an intangibleness to the whole thing. You know what I mean? There's a slightly intangible feeling to the whole thing. And when you say something like everything you do in your business is world building, right? Well, that feels tangible. That feels like, okay, well, everything I do is world building. But, you can do it the wrong way too, right? You can do it the wrong way and not do a good job of world building. So it's like everything you do in your business is world building. Everything you do in your business is not world building. There's an intangibleness to it, and there's a tangibleness as well to it, So this kind of goes back to what I was saying. I mean, I think this subject is a little bit hard to teach. I think it's easier for some people to wrap their minds around it. Like people who grew up loving role-playing games, people who grew up loving fantasy and science fiction where these entire worlds were built. People who grew up loving D&D and stuff like that. I think that they're going to be able to grasp this a lot easier. But people who did not grow up liking that stuff, people who don't care about that kind of world building stuff, they're not really into writing and fiction and all this other kind of stuff. Like it might be harder for people like that to grasp this, okay? So that's why I say again, this subject of world building, it's hard to teach and there's an intangibleness to it, right? So that's the eighth thing I would tell you about this book that sticks out to me. 9. What's the ninth thing I can tell you about this book? The ninth thing I would tell you about this book is it's entertaining, all right? And I talked about this before with the email schema book review that I did, but Settle has an entertaining writing style. Well, a lot of this book is interviews and talks that he did. Well, that writing style, it translates to his talks and his interviews as well. He speaks he is a charismatic person. He has a very unique personality, and he's a funny guy. And it all kind of translates into this writing, right? So it makes it entertaining. It's entertaining to read. And I think that's always helpful when you're trying to read a book, especially like a business book. Man, I've been doing business for a long time now, and I have read a lot of business books, and some of them are slogs, man. Some of them are slogs. This one's not a slog. Settle writes in an entertaining style. He talks in an entertaining style. He's a charismatic person. He has a unique personality, and it's entertaining. He's pretty easy to listen to. So that's the ninth thing I'd tell you about this. And then the 10th thing I'd tell you about this, my number 10, my 10th point about this book is I can tell you wholeheartedly, this is not for everyone. This is not for everyone. when I was a kid, this is like in the late 80s, early 90s, you know, not everybody liked D&D, man. Not everybody liked video games. You know, you were kind of considered a dork or a geek if you liked that stuff. Well, I like that stuff. I like D&D and I like video games, and I had a group of friends who played Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. It was second edition Dungeons and Dragons back then. But anyways, I actually have the very first boxed Dungeons and Dragons in my house right now. I should have brought that out to talk about this. But you know, the point is, I was into this kind of stuff when it wasn't really cool to be into this kind of stuff. Now, and today's day and age, I know it's kind of cooler to like this geeky stuff. It's cooler to like D&D. It's cooler to like, you know, video games, and it's cooler to like this kind of stuff. However, I will say, even though it might be a little more trendy to like this kind of stuff, I don't know how many people actually do like this kind of stuff. Like, I think that there's still probably a lot of people out there who might not resonate with these ideas, right? I still think there's probably a lot of people, no matter what is cool socially, I still think people are people. And I think that, you know, some people aren't going to be into it and some people are going to be into it. You know, some people like the idea of fake fictional worlds where everybody's a character and stuff. And some people aren't going to like that stuff. Some people are all about like logistics and they're all about their business. They're not trying to deal with no fake stuff, right? And I don't think that what Ben Settle talks about in this book is talking about fake stuff. He's just talking about a different way to look at, you know, your business. And I think that's great. But again, I don't think this book's for everybody. I think some people are really no nonsense and they're not about like trying to view their products as characters and some kind of epic, science fiction universe or something. It's not a science fiction universe, but they're not interested in doing that, man. It's like a little bit too blurred lines for them. You know, there's a little too much intangibleness going on there. So I don't think it's going to be for everybody. But I do think for people who can rock with it, for people who like science fiction and fantasy and all those kinds of things, and who can understand this concept of world building, I do think it's a great alternate way to look at your business. And it could definitely potentially help you come up with new ideas and concepts when it comes to product creation, new ideas and concepts when it comes to how you handle your customer support, new ideas and concepts when it comes to how you might handle your pricing, and a lot of other different realms in your business, just by taking a step outside of your business and looking at it in a different way. So again, wrapping up, this book ain't for everybody, but if you have an open mind, I think this book can really help you see your business from a different light. It can help create a paradigm shift for you when it comes to looking at something you're already very familiar with. And I think that's invaluable. I think anybody and everybody should be able to use that. So anyways, those are my 10 points about Ben Settle's Biz World. I really like the book. It's not for everybody, but I enjoyed it. So hope that's helpful to you guys. Hope you're doing amazing out there. And man, I will see you on the next video whenever I put that up. All right, now, peace.